It is time for the Christmas Eve Running the Bases podcast. This is Season 1, Episode number 12. It's been a really crazy week of baseball. A lot of moves have happened. There haven't been too many that are big boy deals, but there are some that really are awesome. But let's just get right into it here. We're going to start it off. The Brewers making back-to-back signings at the beginning of the week. This is from December 17th all the way to today, December 24th. The Brewers signed Eric Sogard and Justin Smoak to one-year contracts. They signed Eric Sogard to a $4.5 million contract and Smoak to a $5 million contract. Two very interesting deals. Sogard fits in very well with this infield. I think this is a smart move for them. I really don't see this backfiring on them in any way. This is a guy who should be able to hit well. He should be able to hit for average, even maybe some power a little bit. But Eric Sogard is quite the player. He overall is a solid fielder. He hits well. I mean, this is a guy who you should expect to hit over 300 for you and maybe even hit 10 home runs, possibly even driving in 70 RBIs. So that's at his best. I mean, I really am looking forward to seeing what this deal will play out for the Brewers. The Brewers obviously are a good team, and I think they're a really good fit for Eric Sogard. And the same kind of goes for Justin Smoak. I mean, they clearly aren't planning on using Eric Thames at first base. They didn't know if they were getting Travis Shaw back or not. So, I mean, this is clearly a really big opportunity for them to get a first baseman with some pop. I mean, Travis, at this point in his career, I'd expect Justin Smoak to hit 260 with at least 20 home runs. That's what you would expect. This is the first time he hasn't left Toronto in a very long time. Started his career with the Mariners, went over to Toronto, and he's been there for a while. He's been in some All-Star games. He's been a fairly productive player, especially recently. He's picked up his career a lot. But if you look at the Blue Jays aspect of this, something I want to start doing now is looking at how this affects the team that they leave. I mean, the Blue Jays, obviously, they have made some solid signings. They made some big signings more during this week that we will talk about a little bit more later on. But they signed Tanner Roark last week. They're clearly trying to win with him. And, I mean, Justin Smoak is a big bat that they had in their lineup. This year, he was one of their biggest bats, or most veteran bats. But now they've got a much younger core in Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Kevin Biggio, etc. So this guy leaving the team doesn't really affect the Blue Jays too much. It's just a very big deal for the Brewers. Two nice signings. I don't necessarily think the Brewers will be done after this deal, but I definitely think this is a deal that can end up working out. But the next thing that's happening here was the White Sox, who've just been making moves after moves. They've already signed Yasmani Grandal this offseason. They've been making some solid moves, but Gio Gonzalez was their next target. They went out and they signed him. I don't actually know the exact money number on it. It hadn't been announced really when I had been taking the notes on it, and I hadn't seen any number put on it over the few days that I've been looking. So Gio Gonzalez, though, signed to the White Sox. I don't know the years, don't know the money, but this is still a big deal for the White Sox. I'd have to imagine that it's at least a 2-year contract. I mean, this is a guy who should produce. He should be a good pitcher. And for the White Sox, a team that have Lucas Giolito, they also have Dylan Cease coming up. They have some solid pitchers. And Gio Gonzalez might not be their best pitcher, but he could definitely be a number 3 or 4 guy in this rotation, which is exactly what they want. They're coming off a great year of Reynaldo Lopez. I mean, the White Sox have a solid starting pitching staff, a nice young pitching staff, and Gio Gonzalez can help train them and really fine-tune them a lot. And I think overall, Gio Gonzalez, my projections for him is that he's going to have an ERA above 3.3. I think 3.3 is probably the best he will get, and that's respectable. That's really respectable, especially if you're playing on a team like the White Sox. You have to try and have a solid ERA, and that's what this guy should be able to give you. So I think that's really good, and the White Sox should be able to bear the fruit of this deal. Continuing with some pitchers that used to pitch in the NL East, Julio Teheran signing a 1-year deal with the Los Angeles Angels worth $9 million. This is a big deal for the Angels. They just lost Garrett Cole. They didn't get Steven Strasburg. So the two pitchers that everyone kind of thought would go to the Angels were one of the two. They had to make something happen in terms of starting pitching, and they did that. Julio Teheran's not coming off a really good year. He had a 4+ ERA. That's not very good. But this is a guy who started, I believe, 6 consecutive opening days for the Braves. He was the ace of the Braves for a very, very long time until this year. And this is, I mean, I think it didn't help him that he was overshadowed by a lot of things, but this year his control started getting away from him. He was making a lot of walks, he was having a lot of issues, and the Braves really weren't having a good time with him being on the mound. And I think this is an opportunity for him to just reset. That's why a lot of people get one-year contracts just to reset their market value, have a really good year, come back out on the market next year. I mean, there have been so many one-year contracts that we have seen this offseason, which means that all of these guys are going to be back out on the market next year. And you know there are going to be some of these players that are going to have really good years. They're going to be able to have bigger contracts when next year comes along, and that's the goal. And I think that's really what Julio Teheran's going for here. $9 million is a pretty good contract for him. I mean, I think coming off of last year's deal, I think an ERA around 3.5, 3.6 is pretty realistic for him. But again, he could still be a really solid pitcher for the Angels, and I think he fits in really well there. I think he would fit very well with the Angels. He's a very, very, very good pitcher when he is on. I've seen him dominate the Mets for years. This guy can pitch really well. So I think if you're an Angels fan, this is something to look out for. But next up, we have something that hit my good buddy and our podcast mate Ryan Blank pretty hard. The Royals signed Maikel Franco to a one-year, $3 million contract. He was pretty aggravated about this because he didn't understand why they were wasting money on a washed-up third baseman when they need to be spending money on relief pitchers. So that was interesting to see his reaction to that. But Maikel Franco, man, this is a guy who killed the Mets but was really not good anywhere else. He very rarely would hit over 260, and he was lucky to hit 15, 20 home runs. I mean, when he was at his best, he could have solid years, and he would hit maybe closer to 300, but this is not a guy who's going to bat for you. This is a guy who's going to hit, I'm going to project he's going to hit 240 this year and hit 20 home runs. He's going to be their everyday third baseman, and that's where he's going to stay. I don't really project him having a bounce back year this year. 20 home runs is pretty normal for a guy like him playing every single day, and 240 is really not that's not that exciting. So I don't know. I really don't understand where the Royals were coming from here. Obviously, for the Phillies, they had no interest in re-signing him, so it doesn't affect them at all. Same with the Angels and Julio Teheran, which is why I didn't discuss that either. But, I mean, really, for Maikel Franco, this is a good deal for him. This is a great deal for Maikel Franco. This is a guy who a lot of people didn't even expect to maybe get $1 million. And the Royals go out there and triple it. It's really crazy. So, good for them. I think this is a big deal for Maikel Franco and his camp, but I don't really think this is a smart deal for the Royals. The next thing that we are slated to talk about here is a big name in baseball officially deciding that he is going to retire. This actually really came out of left field, or second base, because Ian Kinsler decides that he is going to end his career a little bit short, honestly. He was in the middle of his contract with the Padres. He was hurt all year this year. He ended up deciding to retire. I think this is interesting. I thought he was going to play this year. I really did. I was anticipating him being in the starting lineup for the Padres, and that just didn't work out. But Ian Kinsler, man, what a career. Just overall, one of my favorite players. He probably would come in top 10 when he was playing of my favorite players to watch. He was a great guy, great player, great defender. He could hit. He played with the Red Sox, Rangers, a bunch of different teams. Obviously, he's most remembered for his Rangers days, but this was just a guy who hit well. He defended well. I mean, he is a very, very good player, and I really, really wish him the best of luck over his career. I could definitely see him becoming a coach of some sort, maybe a hitting coach. But Ian Kinsler retiring, I wouldn't necessarily say, anytime you hear someone retire, you always wonder, well, is he Hall of Fame status? I'm not so sure about that. I don't really know if he would get the votes. I think most he'd get is like 60% over his 10 years. I don't really think he'd be Hall of Fame status. He was good, but I don't think he was the best. But it's sad to see Ian Kinsler go. Definitely one of our bigger names in the sport. And he wasn't in his prime anymore, but it was still fun to watch him play when he was good. But going back to the players that are signing contracts, Martin Maldonado, the catcher who was on the Astros this year, re-signs with the Astros to a 2-year, $7 million contract. That is worth $3.5 million per year. That's a pretty good deal for Martin Maldonado, especially because we don't know where Robinson Chirinos is going as of right now. This is a big deal for the Astros because now they're locking themselves up a catcher that they didn't have. They had both of their catchers on the free agent market right now, so they are guaranteed to have one catcher, which is good. I don't necessarily know if they want to have Maldonado be their everyday catcher. This is a guy who doesn't hit very well. I think at best he'll probably hit 240, 250, and maybe hit 10, 15 home runs. But he's definitely there for his defense. He's a great defender. He's one of the top defensive catchers in baseball. And I really I agree with a lot of people that this is a smart move for both teams, for both sides. The Maldonado camp, obviously, this is big for him. They needed him to be, anytime you're a player, you want to make money. And when you're going to a team like the Astros that you know is going to win, it's obviously a big deal if you're going to win on a team like that. So it's good for him, and he now has the opportunity to be their everyday catcher. And for the Astros, it's good as well because there aren't too many great catchers out there anymore. The catching position is probably the worst position in all of baseball in terms of talent, which is why any upcoming catcher in the game, if you can hit really well, you will definitely take over and have a very great opportunity to play. There's just such a lack of catching talent in the sport, which is really disappointing because catchers they are, if not the most important, they are one of the most important positions in the entire game. So it's good for Maldonado and a good contract for him. And then we continue over with a guy a very interesting move that I actually predicted to come. Jonathan Schoop signs with the Tigers. That was actually one of my predictions. And I remember Nick, one of our podcast members, was the Tigers fan. I said, when I said this, he was like, man, I wish. He was like, but I know that's not going to happen. It happened, and I think he's pretty happy about it. Jonathan Schoop, a pretty good player. He's obviously past his prime, but, the Tigers could use this deal. They also signed C.J. Cron to the same exact contract, 1 year, $6.1 million. So two very interesting deals. Two players that are not really the greatest. Schoop is very much past his prime with the Orioles. And now this is a guy who he should hit 265 and maybe hit 15 home runs. He is a good player, but he's not going to be the player that he once was. And 265 for the Tigers is not bad. C.J. Cron, I don't know about him. I'm thinking 230 at least and maybe 15, 20 home runs. He's more of a home run hitter than Schoop is. But two solid veteran players who can help kind of grow the talent of those younger players. That's really the goal. If you're a rebuilding team, you want to make your players become more professional. You want to make them grow. That is the point of having these kinds of things happening, and that's exactly what they're going to get by signing these two players. They are going to be able to train their younger players to become better and become more professional major leaguers. Sticking with the AL Central, the White Sox signed Dallas Keuchel back to the White Sox, a 3-year, $55.5 million contract worth $18.5 million a year, and he has a 4th-year option. This contract really came out of left field. There were no rumors about the White Sox and Keuchel. It really just kind of came out of nowhere, like boom, Dallas Keuchel to the White Sox. I was like, wow, this surprised me, and it surprised a lot of people. And I think the main reason why it surprised so many people was because Keuchel, the White Sox are not a team that's going to win now, and here they are. They've gone out and signed Yasmani Grandal, Gio Gonzalez, and Dallas Keuchel. Now they find themselves, if Reynaldo Lopez, Dylan Cease, and Giolito can pitch the way they can, the White Sox apparently will now have one of the best rotations in baseball. You've got Reynaldo Lopez, who's coming off a really, really good year, a almost Cy Young year if it weren't for the other players. He was really solid this season overall. He was their best pitcher. You've got Lucas Giolito, who obviously has such amazing potential. He hasn't lived up to it quite yet, but he was one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball when he came up. Then you also have Dylan Cease, who is one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball right now. He was called up, I think, a little bit too early, and I really just don't know about his ability to pitch at the major league level quite yet, but maybe in another year or so when he's gotten some of that tenderness to be stiffened up, that he can be one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's got some great stuff. I saw him pitch against the Mets this year. You've got Gio Gonzalez, who is a very good veteran who can easily get you 10 to 15 wins a year. And then you have Dallas Keuchel, who's coming off a great second half of the year with the Braves. He obviously didn't play any of the first half, but still, he was the Braves' best pitcher down the stretch. So the White Sox now have a very solid rotation in which every 5 days you're getting a good pitcher out there. If they stay healthy, they are going to have one of the best rotations in baseball. And they now, with these two signings, if they don't bolster their bullpen, they're not going to win the Central. But with the way that the Twins and Indians have been approaching this offseason, the White Sox might become one of the best teams. And, you might be looking at Manny Machado next year and saying, man, you should have gone to the White Sox because look at what these guys are doing. They're not messing around. They missed out on their big fish last year in Manny Machado. Now they're going for it this offseason. They're not letting anything get out of their reach. So good for the White Sox, man. This is a very big deal for them, and I think this could really help them out a lot. And now going back to the Blue Jays, I mentioned they had some big signings that happened later on in the podcast, and two big signings in Travis Shaw and Hyunjin Ryu. Travis Shaw, the first one that I'm going to talk about here, the third baseman, first baseman, whatever you want to classify him as. He can really play all over the place. A good power-hitting left-hander signs a one-year, $4 million contract. That is a very efficient contract for that kind of guy. He's coming off a year that he really didn't play very well. I mean, he is hoping for a bounce-back season. When this guy's healthy and when this guy's playing up to his potential, he should hit 280 and hit 30 home runs. I'm projecting this year that he's going to hit 270 and hit maybe 20-25, but I think this is a still great opportunity for him to get some of his mojo back, get himself back into the market next year, and have a really good contract. Like I was saying with those one-year deals, that's what you have to do. You just have to reestablish yourself as the player that you once was, and now and now he has the opportunity to do that with the Blue Jays. They're filling that first base hole that Justin Smoak is leaving. So, I mean, in terms of hurting the Brewers made two big signings. They basically swapped players. They signed Justin Smoak. The Blue Jays signed Travis Shaw. I mean, really great move for both of them. They're very similar players, and I mean, Justin Smoak is just a switch hitter, honestly, but I mean, Travis Shaw, really good player, but the bigger deal here, obviously, is the Hyunjin Ryu signing. A guy who has been with the Dodgers his entire career. He has never left the Dodgers, and he has really been a fantastic player over his career, but he never has been able to play full season until this year. And when he did that, it really proved to be dangerous for him because the guy was really bad in the second half of the year. But in the first half of the year, he was the best pitcher in baseball by far. The guy had a sub-2 ERA. He had a 1.5 ERA until the second half, in which he had two starts in a row where he gave up 7 runs, and that blew his ERA up, and that actually cost him his Cy Young. So, I mean, for Hyunjin Ryu, this is the guy who came second place in the Cy Young voting this year, and the Blue Jays just signed him to a 4-year, $80 million contract. That's $20 million a year. That's a big boy deal. That is a very big boy deal, and that's what I was talking about in the beginning of the podcast, that there were a couple big boy deals that happened, and this is one of them. You've got the Blue Jays going out here. They now signed Tanner Roark and Hyunjin Ryu. They're here to play. They've made some solid signings this offseason, 3 very big signings that could actually make them be a potential wildcard team. But now that AL East, man, it is a very contentious division. Because, other than the Orioles, you have 4 teams in there that could be 500 teams. You've got the Yankees, who just signed Garrett Cole. You've got the Red Sox, who are seemingly looking like they're going to rebuild, but they're coming off a very difficult year, and they might be able to hit 500 again. You've got the Rays, who are going for the throat. They made it to the wild card game and made it to the ALDS, only to be cut a little bit short of the ALCS by the Astros. And then you have the Blue Jays, who are coming out here making some solid signings. I mean, the Blue Jays are still right now the number 4 team in this division, but I mean, they are right now, in terms of on paper, they are battling with the Red Sox for that number 3 spot. And I think that's pretty interesting to see as a Blue Jays fan, that this could end up being a really solid year for the Blue Jays and a very bright side year for them. This has been a very solid free agent season, and this offseason's been, in my opinion, the best offseason we have seen so far. We've seen a lot of really great signings, a lot of really smart signings and trades. It's been a really great offseason for baseball. I think as long as this Players Association deal goes through and we don't have a lockout, we are going to be having a really great year of baseball this year. I'm looking forward to it. But we only have 3 more things to talk about here, and this one is one that I really want to talk about a lot. The Indians signed Cesar Hernandez to a 1-year, $6.25 million contract. This is one of the most interesting contracts I've seen all offseason. This is a guy who can hit 300 easily. He should hit 310 for you, and he did that with the Phillies with consistency over the last few years of his career. Obviously, this year wasn't his best year ever, but, I mean, this, for the Indians, he should be hitting 310 and hit 15 home runs. And that is an amazing player. And if you're the Indians now, this gives you a really big and a very interesting question as to what does this mean for the rest of their team. Does this mean that they are going for it? Does this mean that they are rebuilding? I don't know. But Cesar Hernandez will be their everyday second baseman. But this leads me to the bigger question of Lindor. What does this mean for Francisco Lindor? Does this mean that they are now deciding, all right, well, we got this guy, and if you look at their infield, with the team they have right now, with Cesar Hernandez, Francisco Lindor, and Jose Ramirez, they have the best infield in baseball, and you can't tell me otherwise. And even Carlos Santana at first should hit 20 home runs for you. That's an amazing infield. And then I mean, if you look at the rest of this team, their pitching staff is very depleted, but if they go out and make some moves, I mean, they just traded Corey Kluber. That shot themselves in the foot, which was very stupid, which leads me to believe that what they are going to do is now that they got this guy, he is their replacement for Lindor, and they are now going to be very actively shopping him and are going to be trying to trade him away, which is very sad because Lindor is, again, one of the best shortstop, if not the best shortstop in all of baseball, and you've got Cesar Hernandez, who's going to be out here playing either second, or he's probably going to play second, and Ramirez will go back to short where he should be. But, I mean, this infield right now, you've got Jose Ramirez, Francisco Lindor, and Cesar Hernandez. Those should be your number 1, 2, and 3 hitters in the lineup, with Hernandez leading off, Ramirez batting second, and Lindor batting third, or you could flip Lindor and Ramirez. That is an amazing lineup that should, for no reason at all, be taken away. This is just a fantastic lineup. It is powerful. It will be hitting over 300, no question. Those are 3 guys who should hit at least 315 for you, and if they're playing well. So, I mean, honestly, this is going to lead to some interesting things. I don't know whether there are 3 things that I see can happen. I've already said 2 of them. They either keep the 3 guys in their infield, they now more actively shop Francisco Lindor, or they raise the price on Francisco Lindor and say, well, now we have this guy. We can win now, so you better give us a really good player or else we're not going to trade him away. So those are, in my opinion, those 3 options. I think now they're going to keep Jose Ramirez. But again, like I said, my most likely thing that they're going to do, I think, is to trade Lindor, which is pretty disappointing, but still, this is a very good contract. 1 year, an opportunity for him to reset himself again, like I've said for all of these guys. Then we go 2 things that happened this morning on December 24th. Christmas Eve was happy for these last 2 teams, but the first one, both of them hit home. The Arizona Diamondbacks, the team that we are home, they're technically our home team right now. The Arizona Diamondbacks, Cole Calhoun is the newest Arizona Diamondback, signs a 2-year, $16 million contract with a 3rd-year team option. This is a great deal for the Diamondbacks. Overall, nothing really could go wrong with this. So you're signing a guy, he's going to be paid $8 million a year to be your everyday right fielder. I mean, he's going to be a middle of the order at that. He will hit you 270 and he will hit 15 home runs. That is what you need from this kind of player, and he is a fantastic bat for these guys. And I think for Cole Calhoun and for the Angels, this is a not a very big deal for them. Obviously, you want to keep this kind of player, but I didn't really think they had any intention of keeping him from the beginning of the offseason. So this is why this is a very big deal for them. Good for the D-backs. This is a huge deal. This really gives them a big bat, a great glove out there in right field. But the last thing that we have to talk about that happened this morning that, oh my goodness, made me the happiest person alive. The New York Mets have officially signed Dellin Betances to a 1-year, $10.5 million contract with 2 player options that'll take place for the 2021 season and the 2022 season. It is a very confusing contract, but I'm going to try and dumb it down as best as I can, and even I'm very confused by it. It is a 1-year deal worth $10.5 million. He signed a signing bonus, which gave him extra money because he was signing the team right now. So he got a good chunk of money today because he signed this contract, which is the goal. And he will be getting $10.5 million this year. If he has any injuries regarding regarding Achilles or his previous injuries, then his contract, I believe, will be chopped down to $3 million this year. If he performs to a certain level, then he will be signed for the 2021 season for an extra $3 million. And if he performs well in that season in 2021, then he will be back for 2022. I don't know the exact amount for that year. So this is probably the most confusing contract I've ever looked at, and of course it has to be with the Mets, the team that I should know the most about and understand the most about, and this is the most confusing thing I've seen all offseason, but I don't care. The Mets have Dellin Betances this year. That's all that matters, and we might have him for 3 years in total. So that's the gist of it. But, I mean, last week, I'm sitting here saying to myself, man, the Phillies are going to sign Dellin Betances before next podcast, and I'm going to be sitting there complaining that the Mets should have gone out and signed him. We lost another guy to the Phillies. Come on. And now here I am, jumping for joy, because the Mets got a beautiful Christmas gift in the Dellin Betances signing. I mean, honestly, it's the most wonderful time of the year. We're having a holly jolly Christmas out here as Mets fans because Dellin Betances, baby, is coming to the Mets. He is coming off a year where he played, I believe, one game, and I couldn't care any less because this guy, when he is good, should be playing well and will be our best reliever. And I don't care if he sucks, because I am just happy that the Mets spent their money, because this is something I never saw. But some amazing things that came out of this deal were that there were two players that we heard were very, very influential. I heard that Dellin Betances was quoted to say that he wanted to play for Carlos Beltran, and that is why he came back. He wanted to play for Carlos Beltran, and he wanted to play in New York. That was the reason he signed this contract. And I heard that him and his good friend Yoenis Cespedes talked a lot about it, and Cespedes was a very big influence in this contract getting done as well. So I heard that Cespedes given the Mets a little bit of life this offseason, giving the Mets something good to look forward to regarding him, in that he gave the Mets Dellin Betances. And Dellin Betances came right out this morning, posted a picture on Instagram of himself in a Mets jersey holding up a present saying, "I'm a Mets player. Hi, I'm here. We're winning a World Series, LFGM." I was sitting there reading that caption. I was like, wow, this dude was ready for this. I mean, he came out rip-roaring. I mean, he had been signed for like 20 minutes. He already had a picture taken of him in a Mets jersey in front of a thing, in front of a Christmas tree, holding up a present, and his bio had already said pitcher for the Mets. I mean, come on. This guy was ready for it. He was excited. He knew he wasn't going back to the Yankees. He had his eyes set on the Mets. I heard that he turned down more years and more money to sign with the Mets. I can't believe it. Brodie Van Wagenen, you are a legend. I love you. You have just made every Met fan happy this morning. So thank you. And on that note, we're going to end this podcast. Have a very Merry Christmas. This has been a spectacular way to end this year of baseball. Obviously, I'll be back next week on December 31st, the last day of 2020. It couldn't get any better than this. This has been a great year of baseball, and this offseason's been amazing, and I'm so happy that the Mets just signed Dellin Betances. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a Merry Christmas, a happy rest of your Hanukkah, and we will see you guys all next week.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me.